Hi. So I have a ghost encounter that some of you might find curious. I live in quite a remote part of England, near the Peak District. My family runs a small farm here. As you can imagine, at night it's completely black outside, but the skies can be amazing for stargazing because we live so far out and high up. Anyway, this was about 5 years ago. I was looking out of my bedroom window. It faces onto the back of our farm. There's an indoor animal pen not far from the house in front. Across the yard, then to the left we have a large field that is bordered by a wooded area on the far side. It faces onto the back of our farm. There's an indoor animal pen not far from the house in front, across the yard. Then to the left we have a large field that is bordered by a wooded area on the far side. And there is a glowing figure just stood there at the very side of the field. It wasn't really bright and I almost missed it, but it was a human figure and it was just stood there looking up, not really at me though. I was quite freaked out, and when I'm scared I'll often just freeze, so I was staring at it for a good minute, but then I saw it fade away. It didn't walk away or anything like that, it literally faded. It was definitely not a reflection of any sort on the glass. To this day, it still freaks me out, so I keep my curtains closed whenever it's dark. As a young man, I loved to climb mountains. This is an encounter that occurred to me on one climbing expedition. We had left a hut late one night. The intention was to summit a mountain in a single long push by climbing right through the night. It was bad weather in the middle of winter and there was deep snow, and we were trying to find our way through a maze of crevices on a glacier. I remember the howling wind and the clouds moving rapidly through the sky as the bulk of the mountain loomed over us. There was a full moon which would hide behind the clouds before emerging again. I remember seeing a man moving up the slope from below us. The first thing that struck me was he didn't have a headlamp on. I yelled over the wind at my climbing partner, "Let's go talk to this guy." "What guy?" "That guy," pointing down at the figure moving towards us. "What guy?" At this point I remember losing it, shouting, "That guy right there." And at that point I looked down to see absolutely nothing. Thinking he had fallen into a crevice, we walked down but we never found any tracks. In the years since, I've heard reports of similar encounters in the area. In fact, recently the bones of a deceased climber from the 1970s were discovered, melted out of the ice. The news report reminded me of that mysterious climber from that night. When I was young, about 10 years old, my mum left us with a babysitter and went out for the evening. We played board games, watched TV, and eventually went to bed. This is when I saw a ghostly, creepy being. As I lay in bed, I got this horrible feeling I was being watched. I looked into the hall and saw this large, ghostly being walking down the hallway. It stopped for a moment and seemed to look at me, and then continued down the hall. I stayed in bed, terrified, and tried to convince myself that it was in my head. Sometime later, my mum came home and I heard her asking the babysitter if everything went well. The babysitter said we were fine and all was well, but she was freaked out because while she was laying on the couch, she could have sworn that she saw a large ghostly figure walking down the hall. I can't believe she saw it too. There was no way for me to convince myself it was my imagination. I hated that house from that day forwards, and was glad when we moved. I never saw the ghostly being again, but that experience still haunts me to this day.